We are going to begin this hour with that severe weather that's impacting much of the country. This is from coast to coast. Out west, the Dragon Bravo fire, which has been burning north of the Grand Canyon for a month now, it's charred more than 116,000 acres, making it the 8th largest wildfire in Arizona history. And the smoke from that fire, as well as ones that are burning in California and then also up in Canada, it's clouding skies throughout the Midwest and East Coast. The visibility is so bad at times and in some places that Boston Logan International Airport was forced to delay flights for up to an hour yesterday.
The fires aren't the only concern this morning. A heat wave is baking the Southwest and could break several record high temperatures. Even nightfall doesn't bring relief, with the mercury hovering around triple digits in some places after the sun sets. On the other side of the country, in the southeast, heavy rains and flash floods are the biggest concern. A tropical disturbance is churning off the coast of northeast Florida. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is following it all and has the latest from Hoboken, New Jersey.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. Many cities across the country right now, and the people living in them are waking up under hazier skies than normal. That's true for this one as well. The second that you step outside the door, you can really see and smell that smoke. You look over my shoulder right now. It's not that it's overcast right now. That's the Manhattan skyline. You're seeing this just film of haze that's out there. So anything that's above an AQI or air quality index of above 100 generally will prompt an alert. That was the case yesterday in New York. The prognostication for today is somewhere in the range of 110 for the New York City metro area. Same thing for the Hudson River Valley and central parts of New York State as well. Some of the worst air quality anywhere in the country as of right now. Burlington, Vermont is almost at 160. Similar readings and forecasts for cities like Cleveland, Grand Rapids, parts of California as well, cities that are really close to those fires that are burning in San Bernardino County and certainly Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo, where some 70,000 plus acres have been torn up there in the central part of California, and that continues as well. You know, what does that all mean? So pulmonologists say that any exposure above 100, really between 100 and 200 AQI, means you're taking in between a quarter and a half a pack of cigarettes every single time you're exposed to that. Now, obviously, for folks who have underlying conditions like asthma or heart disease, it can be particularly aggravating. So you have more than a dozen states right now across the country that have some form of an air quality alert. All of Michigan yesterday had that in effect. We'll be watching again today. The expectation is that some of that smoke is going to be clearing out by Wednesday. But the reality is, with changing conditions right now, there's so much potential fluctuation with patterns that the smoke could come right back again. So we're waiting for some relief. I'll also add a couple of notes on these fires. Out in California, you're now at almost 230,000 acres burned this year. That's about 100,000 more, according to the LA Times, than what you would typically see this time of year, which is to say this is on pace to be the worst wildfire season on record in California. That's a scary thought. And as far as the fires from Canada, you're looking at a situation where there are some 4,000 blazes so far this year. It's the second worst fire season all time for Canada. So we're really looking at some historic stuff right now. And then on top of all of that, guys, you're seeing just scorching temperatures in parts of the South and Southwest. Cities like Phoenix and Yuma and Palm Springs, for example, up at about 110 degrees yesterday. And we're not seeing any signs of relief. So it's really a tough stretch right now between the smoke and the heat that Americans are dealing with. Guys, back to you.
All right, Sam, thank you.
We are keeping a close watch on your forecast as the country wakes up to this another day of extreme weather this morning.
Our track continues with your morning news now weather. Meteorologist Amelia Draper joins us live from our Washington, D.C. affiliate, WRC, with the latest. Amelia, good morning.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. Well, here is a look at those air quality alerts. Again, they stretch from the Great Lakes through the Northeast. This includes all of New York, a good portion of Pennsylvania, back into Michigan and Wisconsin as well. And as Sam was saying, while the smoke could scour out as we head throughout the work week, it's a difficult forecast. And ultimately, I think that it's going to stick around in these similar locations. So not a lot of relief. Meanwhile, we head down to the southeast where it is soggy, tracking heavy rainfall already during these early morning hours into parts of South Carolina. You can see even some thunderstorm activity already into parts of Georgia. Now, we do have a flood watch for parts of Alabama and Georgia throughout the day today. This impacts 9 million people. But just outside of this flood watch, we already have some very serious flash flood warnings in effect for parts of South Carolina, where this morning they picked anywhere from about 2 to 3.5 inches of rain, with another inch possible. So talking about that flash flood risk today, it expands from Macon to Augusta up through the Charlotte area, especially especially in low-lying areas and roadways where it will be the most flood-prone. We're talking about rainfall rates of 1 to 2 inches an hour. And then as we head throughout the day tomorrow, more rain is expected in the southeast. So looking at total rainfall amounts, many locations picking up upwards of 1 to 3 inches, potentially even a little bit more. Then as we take you out to the southwest, it is all about the extreme heat. It's out there right now, and it will continue to build throughout the work week. Joan, Savannah.
All right, Amelia, thank you so much. Overnight, civil arrest warrants were issued for dozens of Texas Democratic lawmakers. They fled the state to protest what they're calling a Republican power play. Around 50 House Democrats left town on Sunday to slow down a GOP plan to redraw the state's congressional maps. Republicans retaliated by voting yesterday to approve those civil arrest warrants targeting their colleagues across the aisle. So far, Democrats have managed to block the chamber from reaching a quorum, which is needed to move that legislation forward.
This rare mid-decade redistricting effort would redraw congressional lines around Democratic strongholds in South Texas and then in major cities like Austin, Dallas, and Houston. That would ultimately give Republicans a path to pick up 5 seats in next year's midterm elections. Yesterday, Democrats dismissed threats from Governor Greg Abbott, who's ordered the Department of Public Safety to find and arrest those lawmakers who fled the state.
Subpoenas from Texas don't work in New York, so he gonna come get us how? Subpoenas in Texas don't work in Chicago. He's gonna come get us how? So let me be clear. He's putting up smoke and mirrors.
NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us now with the latest. Ryan, good morning. So what are some of the ways Governor Abbott and Republicans are trying to pressure these Democrats to return to Texas? I mean, these arrest warrants, what is it they're trying to accomplish here?
Well, a lot of it really, Joe, are empty threats. Greg Abbott has issued these arrest warrants. The legislative leaders in Texas have issued these arrest warrants. But as you heard the Texas lawmakers say there, they really are not effective if the lawmakers are out of state. That's part of the reason they left the state. They'd have to have cooperation from the state in which they fled in order to bring them back to Texas to seek any sort of justice on that front. The other thing that Abbott is threatening is expulsion. He's saying that these members should be kicked out of office, but that is not an easy process. And frankly, the governor doesn't have a lot of a role in that. That is something that's done by the legislature. It would require them to be accused of something, a trial to take place, and then a super majority in order to expel them. Part of the reason that we're in this position is because there isn't a super majority to move forward if they can't get a simple quorum to move this process forward. So while a lot of these Republican threats are empty to a certain degree, it's also important to keep in mind that Democrats are really just delaying this process. At some point, they are going to have to come back to the state. At some point, they are going to have to come back and assemble. And ultimately, the votes are there to make this process move through. What we're seeing on both sides here is just a lot of theater to draw attention to the issue as it's unfolding in Texas.
And then, Ryan, beyond the theater, as you called it there, what are the stakes here? Like, what's at play on a national level? Because right now, Republicans hold this slim advantage in the House. But what role is President Trump playing in all this? And then what could redistricting do for that slim margin?
Well, Savannah, the reason we are here is because Donald Trump told Texas Republicans that they needed to change their map and try and create more seats that were friendly to Republicans to help the Republicans continue control the House of Representatives in the upcoming 2026 midterms. The first midterm election after a president is elected is always difficult for the party in power. It is rare that they're able to keep that power, especially when you consider how tight the margins are right now. And when you look at President Trump's approval rating right now, it seems to be a good place for Democrats. So Republicans are trying to do everything they possibly can to try and slim those margins down and create advantages where they lie. Some Democrats, though, Savannah and Joe, say by changing these districts, you're also changing districts where Republicans enjoy very healthy margins. Those votes have got to come from somewhere. It could actually create more competitive races. So none of this is a done deal until voters actually go to the polls in 2026.
That's a great point there, Ryan. Also, if this redistricting effort does ultimately succeed in Texas, Democrats are calling for blue states to retaliate, essentially launching a redistricting war. I mean, that could mean something similar could happen in California or New York. What would that look like?
Yeah, it wouldn't be as easy because these blue states have created, in some cases, independent redistricting commissions that make this process harder to do. But like anything in government, if you've got enough votes, you can make it happen. And California and New York Democrats seem insistent that if Texas takes this step, they're willing to take this step as well. It becomes basically a gerrymandering arms race, which ultimately is probably not that good for the political process, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to have probably the same number of Democrats and Republicans come to Washington, but they'll come from districts in which there is no incentive to work with the other party. These are deep red districts and deep blue districts. It's just going to make the process in Washington that much harder. It's already difficult to get anything done now. If this becomes a situation where this gerrymandering gets out of control, it's going to be almost impossible to get anything done in Washington.
All right, Ryan Nobles, appreciate your reporting. Thank you.
Well, let's dig into the legal implications here with NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. So, Danny, the civil arrest warrants, let's start there with just how much weight those even carry. And then secondly, this sort of threat from the governor suggesting that he would call for new elections to fill the seats of these Democrats who've left the state. Is that a possibility?
These are arrest warrants we're talking about, but they're not criminal arrest warrants. They're very, very different. These are not people indicted and charged with a crime. However, the governor has separately said, and this is a separate issue, that they may be committing felonies if they're accepting money. We can get into that, but the arrest warrants are for civil purposes, only to grab them and bring them back here. The real question is, to what extent will Texas be able to reach out beyond its borders and grab representatives who are now in Illinois or some other state? And so in terms of removing these individuals from office, it's an uphill battle. There's a lawsuit called a quo warranto, very rare, but essentially he would be arguing that they have abandoned their position. But it would be a very difficult thing to prove, because Texas courts have essentially said that these walkouts to break quorum are permissible.
Let's talk about redistricting here, because typically it happens after a census when we decide, oh, do we need to redraw lines based on what the census tells us about how things have changed over the last decade. Is it legal to do it in the middle of a decade? Do Democrats have a legal challenge here?
The law requires that the redistricting follow the census, but there's no constitutional or statutory rule that it must be every 10 years. The census is every 10 years, so it makes sense. However, there is no prohibition legally to redistricting mid-decade in 2025. There's nothing that disallows it. However, there might still be challenges based on, for example, racial gerrymandering or partisan gerrymandering, but that is a much, much harder case to make, because courts have essentially said you can't even bring that claim in court.
I think the language that Ryan used was that this whole thing is kind of delaying the inevitable. How long can a standoff like this keep going?
It's hard to say. I mean, the Texas Constitution and law allows for these walkouts. It could go as long as the Texas legislature is in session. But again, you're going to see the governor try to impose severe financial penalties. And he's even suggesting a theory that they are committing felonies by absconding. And the theory behind that is, if they're fundraising and they're accepting money to pay those $500 a day fines, then the argument goes that this is a form of bribery. This is a big contortion of bribery theory, which is as nebulous as it gets to begin with. However, this would be a tough one to prove in terms of a criminal felony, especially with people who believe they're doing their their legislative duty and fighting for their constituency.
Danny Cevallos, appreciate you as always. Good to have you here.
In news out of the Trump administration, a senior official says the Attorney General has directed the Justice Department to launch a grand jury investigation into how Obama-era officials assessed Russian interference way back during the 2016 election.
Yeah, and the move comes after National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard said last month that she was sending criminal referrals to the Justice Department. She alleged that top Obama administration officials carried out a, quote, treasonous conspiracy against then-candidate Donald Trump. Well, Democrats are dismissing this as an effort to distract attention from the Jeffrey Epstein case.
NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard joins us now to talk about this and some other headlines out of Washington. Vaughn, good morning. So past probes, including 2 conducted by Republicans, found no crimes committed by Obama-era officials. So what are we learning about this investigation? Is it going to be conducted any differently?
Right. Good morning, guys. It's all a very good question here. And I think we need to start off by saying this process has not been normal. Typically, grand jury proceedings are secret. The Department of Justice never goes and publicly announces that they're impaneling a grand jury to investigate and potentially indict any individuals of criminal wrongdoing. This is just not normal. The second part that is not normal about this is to have an Attorney General, Pam Bondi, make the announcement, but not explicitly say where this investigation is taking place. NBC News has seen the letter in which there's an unnamed prosecutor in a particular district who is going to be sought after to go forward with this investigation here. But there's not even specific alleged crimes that have been named by the Attorney General. Now, we can glean from past weeks the suggestion that potentially conspiracy against rights is a potential crime that they will try to prosecute or investigate. But what is being alleged is questionable to the extent that it amounts to an actual crime. Former DOJ officials who have spoken to NBC News have called this all a political stunt. They are alleging that back in 2017, after then-candidate Trump won the presidency, there was an effort by the Obama administration to undermine his incoming presidency by suggesting that he and his campaign had colluded with Russia. But as you noted, there was a 3-year investigation by special counsel John Durham, who was appointed by then-President Trump's Attorney General. He ultimately found no conspiracy, brought no charges of that kind. And there was a bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee report that was chaired by then-Senator Marco Rubio, who in 2020 also declared that, in fact, Russia had meddled in the 2016 campaign. So there's a lot of question marks ahead, but this is a very abnormal process. And of course, they would have to ultimately not only impanel that grand jury, but then provide evidence and convince those citizens of Americans to bring indictments against any of these former officials.
Vaughn, we also want to talk about the latest in the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. We understand that 2 of Epstein's abuse victims sent letters to a federal court. This was condemning the Justice Department's request to unseal grand jury testimony. What did they have to say?
Right. There were 2 victims that anonymously wrote this letter to federal judges in New York. The deadline was today for not only Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, but also for the Department of Justice and victims and their attorneys to make their case as to whether grand jury transcripts from the Jeffrey Epstein proceedings should be released to the public. And that is where the 2 of these letters come from. One of those anonymous victims called what has taken place over the last month political warfare, and suggesting that the ongoing deliberations over whether to release the Epstein files amounts to just an effort to protect wealthy people, wealthy men specifically. And there was a mention of scrutiny around Donald Trump and DOJ resources to identify where he is, yet having his name within those files not having been released here at this point in time. Those victims, they do request that their attorneys have a bigger role in any potential redactions in order to ensure that victims' names are protected if, in fact, these federal judges out of New York were to make the determination that any parts of these transcripts were to be released to the public.
All right. Vaughn Hilliard, thank you.
Well, a manhunt in the rugged mountains of Montana for a suspect on the run after a deadly shooting is expanding. This morning, police are intensifying their search for a man accused of opening fire at a bar last Friday, killing 4 people. The suspect is an Army veteran who grew up where the shooting happened. Authorities warn he may still be armed and incredibly dangerous. Here's NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky with the latest.
Investigators scouring the woods near Anaconda, Montana for Michael Paul Brown, a 45-year-old suspected killer, after authorities say he opened fire inside a bar Friday morning.
This is an unstable individual who walked in and murdered 4 people in cold blood for no reason whatsoever.
Officials say this photo, showing Brown without a shirt or pants, captured him before he escaped in a stolen pickup. Investigators say he's likely found clothing and is now believed to be on foot. An Army spokesman tells NBC News Brown served from 2001 through 2005 and was deployed to Iraq, adding he served in the Montana National Guard until 2009.
We have to believe he is still armed. We don't know that he is for sure, but we certainly don't know that he isn't. This is a person who had access to firearms. Obviously, he's had training with firearms.
As the search intensifies, Lacey Grosvold is keeping her 9-year-old daughter close.
We all have to be prepared. You think, well, what would happen if he came up the driveway or if he tried to get into my house? I mean, every single person in this community has to think about those things.
Over the weekend, authorities identified the 4 victims. The family of Nancy Loretta Kelly, sharing she recently retired.
She just liked people. She was definitely a people person.
Our thanks to Morgan Chesky for that report. Well, the U.S. Marshals say they're now offering $10,000 for any information that leads to Brown's arrest.
A federal judge has ruled Sean Diddy Combs will remain behind bars until his sentencing this fall. This is the second time the judge has denied a bail motion to release Combs. In his ruling, the judge said the hip-hop mogul, quote, fails to satisfy his burden to demonstrate an entitlement to release. It comes after one of Combs' ex-girlfriends, Virginia Hewen, wrote a letter to the judge urging his release on bail. She was identified as victim 3 in the government's indictment against Combs, but ultimately did not testify in the trial. Combs was found guilty on 2 counts of interstate prostitution last month, but was acquitted on the more serious charges of racketeering and sex trafficking.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.